guys, welcome back to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going ahead and see what is the difference between a static and a non-static variable. Static, wait, static and a non-static variable. In a previous lecture, we have studied about static and non-static method. In this lecture, we are going to talk about static and non-static variable. So just we are using the static keyword in the front of our variable. So it's a static variable. So let's say we have a class called dog. So we create a class called dog here. And let's say in the dog class, we have a non-static variable called name, which tracks the name of the dog. And we also create a static variable called as static int count. Now, if we create a two object of this dog class, so we can say dog d1 is equals to new of dog, new of dog, and similarly we will say dog d2 is equals to new of dog. So we have created two different objects here for this class. Now let's look at the memory diagram. Now at the memory, what will happen is we will create two objects d1 and d2. So we have created two dog objects. One is referencing to d1, the other would be referenced by d2. Now each of this variable, each of these objects will have its own copy of the name, because name is a non-static variable. So this particular dog will have its own name and this particular dog will have its own name. So we can say that a non-static variable, each of the objects will have its own copy of that variable. But if we talk about a static variable, only one copy of that variable is available, and that will be shared among the object of that particular class. So if D1 has set the value of this count variable to be 1, the D2 will see the same value, because D2 cannot have its own set. It cannot set its own copy, because there is only one copy of that variable will be present. So I repeat, a static variable is a variable which will be shared among all the objects of the class. And if one of the object has incremented or changed the value of the static variable, all the other objects will see the changed value. Whereas in case of a non-static variable, each of the objects will have their own copy independent of the others. So that is what the difference between a static and a non-static variable. Now let me explain with an example here. So let's create a new class called cat class. Click OK. And in this particular cat class, let's say I have a variable, a non-static variable called name. public string name, and I have another variable which is a static variable. Let's say it's count. Now I will go ahead and create an object of this particular class. Let's erase this. Cat class C1 is equals to new of cat class, and then I can create another object of this, copy this, paste here, and it will call it as C2. Now, to call it static variable, you need to use a class name, not the object name. So here, it's not the reference variable. So if you wanted to call the name variable, so I can use C1 dot of name. But if I wanted to call the static variable, so I have to use the class name. So if you wanted to call the count variable, I have to say cat class dot of count is equals to 1. And similarly here, I can say create another value for C2 dot of name. We can say, let's say is Bina. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and display system dot of debug d1 name, that will be d1 name it's c1 name. It's going to be this c1 dot of name, and similarly copy this and here c2 name, and that's going to be c2 dot of name. And if I have increased the value of class dot count, I can always go ahead and do an increment operator here, cat class dot count system dot of debug count value, and then I can say cat class dot of count. So a static variable will always be referred with the class name, not by the objects, because it's a class variable. So you can think like instance variable are the ones that have each of the instance will have its own copy of the variable. Whereas in the case of the static variable, it is called as the class variable because it belongs to the class and there is only one copy of that variable. So now if I go back here, and this particular C1 dot of name is Scooby and C2 dot of name is Veena. And what is this cat class dot count value? It is equals to 1. Now I have incremented the value here. So the new value of the cat class will be 2. So if I go back here and execute, so here if I go ahead and do debug only, it's going to say Scooby Bean and count value is equals to 2. So this is the difference between a static and a non-static variable. So let's meet in next tutorial. Till then, have a good day. Bye.